I set goals so simple that it's
Mhm.
almost impossible to fail them.
I firmly believe that we start supporting our nervous system and start regulating our nervous system the moment we wake up.
I feel like when I don't have these things, things do seem like they fall apart. I'm not as happy and I have more anxiety, more stress.
I don't have enough time. I learned the hard way that generally that excuse is bullshit for me.
Welcome to No Alcohol Needed, the podcast. You are hanging out at the intersection of emotional wellness, personal growth, and living an alcohol-free life. Here we share everything we've learned and continue to learn about how to be happy, no alcohol needed. Hello, everybody. Welcome to No Alcohol Needed. We are so happy to have you here. This is previously Through the Glass Recovery podcast. This is our first episode recording as the No Alcohol Needed podcast. If you want the whole story as to why we have changed the name and why we're rebranding, make sure you check out the episode right before this one. We explain everything. Steve and I are just kind of on a growth journey. We're ready to level up and we're ready to provide you guys with a little bit higher level, higher value content. And so here we are. We're going to feel our way through this episode and see how it goes, but really looking forward to it. Happy to have all of our listeners with us and also very happy to have both Janice and Kristyna with us today. We are going to talk today about habits and New Year's resolutions and all of the good things that come with January. We know that this is the season for attempting resolutions that we think are going to put us on a better path. And of course, that's great. And I think at some point, partway through January, we start asking ourselves, like, how much does it really matter if I actually stick with this thing, right? We start questioning it. We know that's how it goes. So I did some research about habits and routines before we jumped on here. And I want to share one of my findings with you because I think this is really interesting. In 2022, there was a study done in Korea where they determined that if you have your routines consistently disrupted, it actually resulted in a 231% increase in persistent depression and anxiety systems over the course of a whole year. So in normal person terms, what that means is if you don't have a routine or if your routine gets interrupted often, you are over 2 times more likely to regularly experience symptoms of depression and anxiety. I thought that was kind of a mind-blowing statistic and really speaks to the importance of having routines, having habits, being consistent in our lives with all of the good things that we know we need. So we are going to talk about what that looks like today, how we picked the habits that we picked, why we decided what was important for us, and then also fighting through things like the lack of motivation and figuring out what works to help keep us consistent. So let's dive into this by starting out. We're going to talk a little bit about what habits do you guys keep? What do your routines look like? That kind of thing. Anybody's welcome to start.
Well, I'll go. I am a creature of habits because if I don't have structure in my life, I feel like things fall apart. So my general habits are very kind of vague, but simple. That I try to pay attention to what I eat. I make sure I get sufficient sleep and moderate exercise and not to isolate. So I kind of globally, that's what they look like. It's kind of the foundation. What it looks like more in specific action is that daily exercise of one type or another, which is pretty easy. I have dogs. So if nothing else, we're getting a mile or two walk with the dogs. My morning routine, I love this routine actually, because I struggle with overthinking and the glass is half full kind of family I grew up in. So literally before I get out of bed, I do first a body check. Like, did I have a nightmare? Am I already feeling some anxiety? Do I know that I have a lot going on today? And I'm just thinking about that makes me anxious. So I do that. And I may do some deep breathing or grounding before I get out of bed. And then I evaluate my self-talk. And one of the things that I learned in addition to those um, in early recovery was the importance of an affirmation or listening to something positive. If I'm in a rush, it might be and I actually have a playlist on my phone called morning playlist, morning attitude playlist, which like if I'm in a hurry, I'll turn that on while I'm showering or getting dressed. So that because I think it's a choice. Choosing the course of your day is a choice. And my nature as an introvert and that negative Nancy, is to look downward as opposed to upward. So I have to practice that. And that's a long answer to a short question. Kristen, what do you think?
I actually agree with you. One of what I wrote down some notes, like I have the same habits. I try to eat good and I exercise. Also, another thing that is important to me is staying in contact with, my people, like having a connection. Because I feel
Mhm.
like when I don't have these things, things do seem like they fall apart. I'm not as happy and I have more anxiety, more stress. And I feel like you know what you need to do. So, that's what keeps me motivated to keep doing the things because I know that's what I need to do to feel my best.
Mhm.
But I like what you said too about isolation, about not isolating. I think I need to add that to my list because I do find myself doing that too sometimes and I catch myself, and I'm like, I need to get out of that. So yeah.
Yeah.
So you guys touched on something really important. There's a book called Why Has Nobody Told Me This Before? And I will make sure I link it in the show notes because it's brilliant, but it's all about just coping with life in healthy ways. And it's not specifically related to recovery, but it is related to emotional wellness, which obviously is what we're all working towards. But she lays out the important like the basics of a good, healthy lifestyle. And you guys touched on most of these. Exercise and sleep, nutrition, routine, and human connection are the
Mhm.
requirements to a healthy lifestyle. And this is true for all humans. This isn't just for people who are sober, for people who are trying to stop drinking. These are literally just the important, necessary aspects of healthy routine and healthy habits for all humans. And for so many of us, we were missing those and didn't even realize the value and importance of them. Um, I know for me, I'm like Janice, I'm a creature of habit. I love my routines. They are everything that grounds me every day. And I firmly believe that we start supporting our nervous system and start regulating our nervous system the moment we wake up. So, like Janice was talking about checking in, am I anxious? How am I feeling? Do I, and focusing on some positivity, stuff like that, I think is important. I journal. I wake up in the morning. First thing I do is pour a cup of coffee, light a candle, and journal. And it just it gets anything that's in my head out so I can start the day with a fairly clean slate. And if there's anything that's taking up space and already making me anxious or upset in any way, it gets it out on paper. And then I exercise every morning, even if it's just walking on the treadmill because it's snowy here right now. I can't even walk down my driveway without falling. So even on the treadmill for a little bit, but these little consistent bits, I always check in with a couple of friends to make, just say hi and see how it's going. And that's how I start my day. So even if I've got a day of chaos ahead of me, which is pretty regular for me, I know that I'm starting with all of the things that are going to support me for the rest of the entire day. And that's been so, so valuable for me.
One of the things that I've noticed for myself is being an extrovert. Connecting with people is one of the things that I do shortly after I wake up. Is I will send a message to one or two friends and just to say hi, how are you? And sometimes there is no conversation. Like, yeah, I'm doing great, I'm having a good day, whatever. You don't have the time. And sometimes what it does is create the space to get whatever it is that I need off my chest. Like Julie does in a journal, I do through conversation. It's a way to, I woke up grumpy. Why did I wake up grumpy? What am I holding on to? What is this like little ick that I'm feeling? going into my morning. And it gives me a space to release that and give it away. And then that's something that I've maintained through my sobriety. Even in like now, I'm still sober, of course, but like and not drinking isn't much of a problem anymore. But how do I keep continuing to do these healthy things for myself? Communicating for me is a big one. Uh, that also stops me from doing something that you guys mentioned, was isolating. If I communicate, then I open the door already in the morning to inviting people into my life and allowing someone to invite me into theirs. And so I get that communication and a little sense of community. Getting outside is always good. Right now is, I mean, a lot of priorities, and so I try and make time for that. But routine, I sit down, and if I can, the most times, if I can wake up early enough, and I do this most 90% of the days, wake up early enough to have a bath, sit still, not move, and create space for stillness. I wake up early on purpose so I can sit in that spot for half an hour to 45 minutes. And I'll tell you, just not moving and not getting up and not being so task oriented right off the bat. I got to get this done. I got to get this done. I got to get this ready. It really helps my mental state through the rest of the day. And I think that's what we're talking about when we talk about habits, is how can I support myself? And we're talking about morning right now, but how can I support the rest of my day by doing some simple things in the morning that take care of myself just a little bit? It doesn't have to be a lot. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. You know, you have these influencers and stuff that say you need to do all of this crazy stuff in your morning routine to maintain this crazy amazing life, and that's a highlight reel, not a in actual fact. Like, it's all about what works for you and what doesn't work for you, and then get rid of the stuff that doesn't and work on the stuff that kind of feels like it aligns with how you feel. That's important. Acknowledge that and then follow it a little bit. See how it works.
Mm-hmm. So, how did you guys actually go about starting to incorporate new habits? Like, what was really helpful to actually make a new habit stick?
I mean, I feel
You
like consistency is so important. I just feel like I just know that if I don't stay consistent with something, that it's not really going to have an impact on my life. The impact that I'm looking for anyway. So, I know that and people think I'm crazy because I wake up so early to start my day, to get my exercise in first thing, because if I don't do it first thing, I won't get it done. It really does just set the tone for the rest of the day. And if I do take a day off, it really does throw my day off. So I feel like knowing, what could happen helps me stay consistent.
Mhm.
That's a good way to put that. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that too. I just wanna tag on to something that Steve said about, setting those goals high, because it, reminded me, one of my best friends is a life coach. Her name's Katie Van Orden Daces. Um, and when I was early recovery, she helped me kinda get back to some of those patterns that I needed to. And one of the things, and I do this every year with resolutions, but is that I set goals so simple that it's
Mhm.
almost impossible to fail them. So that, like, I have a to-do list every day. I always make sure there's a couple on there that are super easy. Like yesterday, there was one that said, "Text your brother." So you can do that and cross it off. So my point is, set reasonable goals, low goals, something I'm gonna be successful at, to give myself pats on the back along the way. But I agree with Kristen, consistency is the key, because then you develop patterns and they become second nature.
Mm-hmm.
Kristyna said something that consistency equals impact. And the most of the problem when it comes to any sort of resolution or any sort of here's a new habit that I want to try and do. And we've done 30-day challenges plenty of times to create new habits, to try something new, to see if it works. Reading 10 pages a day, changing our diet, our nutrition. Let's eat paleo for 30 days and see how we like it, and give it a valid chance to see how it improves or doesn't improve our lives. And to your point, there are barriers to that. Are you going to get into that a little bit later, Julie? Like the barriers to what the heck gets in the way? Anyways,
You can go ahead and dive into barriers if you want to.
Can
That's
I?
fine. Yeah, go
All
for
right.
it.
I don't have enough time. I learned the hard way that generally that excuse is bullshit for me. Because if it's important enough, I can make time for it. I remember I wanted to run 1 mile a day just to see if I could do that. I gave myself a 1 mile a day challenge. It takes up to about 15 minutes to run a mile, and that's running it slow. And I can tell you that on like day 4, day 5, you start out every new habit, all gung-ho. This is going to be great. I'm going to feel amazing. And then on day 4, I'm like, F this. I don't want to run another mile. I don't want to do that. I don't have time for that. Yeah, I do. I had time for it. I came up with all of the excuses that I thought about in my head. I ended up texting Julie that day, and I'm like, I don't want to run. And I'm just going to tell on myself. And I did. I told on myself, and then I put on my shoes, and then I went and ran that mile. And I said to her, I cannot justify telling you any of these excuses to not spend 15 minutes on something that's good for me. Like 15 minutes. That's all that it's going to require. And so I went out and did it anyways. What I'm going to talk about here is to help me through my barriers is the accountability piece. The piece that I had someone to say, here's the thing that I'm going to do. I'm going to not keep it inside. I'm not going to just keep it like quiet. This is what I'm going to do. I'm not going to tell anybody that I'm going to do it, because I'm going to find my own ways to get out of it. But if I have a buddy or a partner or somebody that is, hey, will you support me in this goal? I would love your support, just to tell you, okay, yeah, I'm going to go out for this run now. Shoot quick text. No responsibility. Cool. Go for it. I ended up running a mile every day for that 30 plus days. And it was just a little bit longer than that, but I had to ask my parents because I was at my parents' place with my girls, and I had to ask somebody to look after my kids so I can go run a mile. How important was it to me? It was important enough for me to find a solution to my problems.
You can always find the solution if it's important to you, right?
Yeah.
To speak to your time thing, I think this is important because there are times that I honestly don't have time to complete my whole morning routine, which involves my morning routine is fairly involved. And like there are times that I don't have 45 minutes to work out. I just don't. I have other things going on that day, or whatever, the different things that I do throughout the day that are pretty routine for me. One of the things that I do if I don't have time is I look at how can I cut this down so that I'm doing just a little bit of it. So instead of doing my full, go for a run and then lift weights kind of workout, I'll just walk for 5 minutes if that's all I have time to do. So I have like a 50% habit, and then I have the 100% habit. And if I really don't have the time, or if I don't have the energy, which honestly, like I've been sick for the last week, I don't have the energy to keep up with everything, but I can cut it down and do the 50%, and it still has the benefit. It still feels good. And the other thing that I was going to mention too is, and I've done this with myself, I've done this with clients also. If I say I'm going to go for a run every day, and I have a day where I'm like, I just don't feel like it, I don't want to go, I at least commit to leaving the house and running like 200 steps and then turning around and coming back. Reality is 90% of the time when you run those 200 steps, you're going to be like, okay, well, I might as well just run the mile. It's fine. I'm good. I'm out here. I'm just going to go. So it's like, just do a teeny tiny bit of the thing you committed to, If it's read 10 pages, you're like, okay, well, I'm at least just going to read 1 page. Fine. You start reading and you're like, okay, I can do the whole 10. Now that I'm here, I might as well just finish the thing I said I was going to do. So it's a way of tricking your brain when you really don't feel like it. Be like, okay, here's the bare minimum. That's enough. But when you do the bare minimum, you're like, oh yeah, I can just finish this. So
The hardest part is
pretty great trick.
starting, isn't it?
That's exactly it. Yeah. If
But-
you start, there's a real good chance you're just going to finish it.
I remember Robbie going, just put your shoes on.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Just put your shoes on. Like, if you don't want to write, just write 2 sentences. You know what I mean? Put the pen in your hand and put it on the paper or whatever that may be. And it was wild. As soon as I put my shoes on and got out the door, everything changed.
Yeah, I
Even
had
my
a
attitude.
client that it was like, just change your clothes and roll out the yoga mat. See what happens. And by that point, you're like, okay, I can do a 10-minute yoga flow. And, it gets easy to do once you start, for sure.
It's almost like with the saying with drinking, they say, just say you're not going to drink for today, worry about tomorrow. So, I mean, it's just like that.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to throw out a practical thing that I do because my barriers are essentially overcommitting. And I think I'm a little ADD, though I've never been diagnosed, I'm easily distracted. So I go back to that list. I keep a list. So if something pops up, I'll write it down so I can continue to focus on the project that I'm finishing on. Because otherwise, I will skip from project to project. Like already, Steve said something that made me go, oh, I'm going to apply this to doing my taxes this year, So
I do the same thing, but I have a note on my phone. And so since my phone's almost always with me, even if I'm out like going for a walk or something, and I have one place on my phone where I put the ideas, put the to-do list, put everything so I can remember it and come back to it.
yeah, I
Yeah.
love that. Because we
Really
always have
similar.
our phones with us.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. What other barriers do you guys have for when you commit to doing something? Or what supports you in moving through? Let's talk about like just lack of motivation. Like, I just don't feel like it. What else works for that?
Well, for me, I think it's what you said earlier about just getting started, doing a little bit. But also I wanted to throw in self-compassion. That came up to me too. I have a try not to tell long stories. So I have a friend because I've written a book. So now my friends all think I'm experts, of which I am not. But so I have a friend who is working on a book, and she's asked me to keep her accountable, to check in with her every few days and say, "What have you written?" And yesterday she gave me an excuse. And I said, well, that's okay. You know what? You responded to this text, and that is essentially doing some work on the book. I planted that seed. So I was trying to, for her, and I did this for myself too. Like when I was writing my book and I'd feel overwhelmed, I'd be like, okay, just open up a few pages, or maybe today you can research self-publishing versus traditional publishing. And so I would be creative. I guess the point here is be creative, try something different, and offer yourself self-compassion along with taking that initial small step.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I think that's so important to just give yourself some grace. Sometimes you got to give yourself some grace. Yeah. Another thing that came to mind when you were talking, Janice, and you touched on this a little bit when you were talking about like writing down the simplest things on your to-do list so you get to check them off. And I can't remember where I read this, but the idea of breaking a task down into micro tasks. And so you can, if your goal is to say clean the kitchen every day. That's actually on my list. I'm so bad at leaving dishes in the sink at night when I go to bed, and I hate that about myself. So that's like one of my things, is trying to make sure that my kitchen is spotless before I go to bed. And I can break that down into little micro tasks, like wiping the counter down and then rinsing the dishes and then loading the dishwasher and then like all of the little things. And you can even have a list so you can check them off as you do them. And it feels so good to put a check in the box. Anytime there's something you don't want to do, just write it on a list, with a little box next to it so you can put the check in. It's actually a dopamine hit for all of us who really struggle with, dopamine balance. It does actually provide dopamine to put a check in a box when you did the thing. So for me, cleaning the kitchen, if I break that down into 6 different tasks, I can put a check in every box and it feels amazing. And any task can be broken down into micro tasks if we want to, if it's helpful and if you want to do it that way.
That is just like starting it's just like we're saying, just starting will get you going. And that's just starting the big task with a little task. So yeah, it's all relative.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
I just thought
say,
of something.
oh, go for
Addition
it,
to,
Janice.
is learning to say no.
Oh,
Or when people like,
yes.
okay, so I have a list of things I want to accomplish, and someone calls and says, "Hey, while you're out, can you do this?" And for me, it's tough because I'm a recovering people pleaser. It fuels that squirrel brain, and I have had to learn to say no, and not no and the big excuse, but no, that doesn't work for me today. You
Mm-hmm.
know,
Yeah.
To
setting
that
priorities.
point,
Mhm.
I and for whatever reason, it's usually my mom, not always, but most of the time, I'll be in the middle of, a task or a thing that I have promised myself I'm going to accomplish, and she calls, and for I don't know why, she just picks the wrong time. It's not her fault, but I just not answering the phone and sending a message that says,
Mhm.
"Hey, I'll call you later." That would have been really hard for me a few years ago. I would have felt like guilty for not just picking up the phone immediately. So even just putting a pause and saying, "No, I'm not gonna focus on you right now. I'm gonna finish my thing and then I'll come back." And for people pleasers, something like that is really tricky. And we
Yeah.
kind of have to be firm in our boundaries there.
Yeah. I did
So
that this weekend. I overbooked and I said to myself, you can't stretch yourself this thin. And I canceled
Mhm.
one of my things. And I did feel guilty. And but I said no. I'm sorry, I'm not gonna make it.
I've
Awesome.
had to do that so many times. I have gonna snowball into like time management here a little bit. I have been so protective of my time. I enjoy my freedom a lot. I enjoy the freedom to do whatever it is that I want to do when I want to do it. And the more I commit to things, the less freedom I have. That's the story that I tell myself. And even though those are the things that I chose. And so I've been very, very selective about what I'm committing myself to and what I haven't been committing myself to. And there are times where even though I've committed to be going to all of the accounting club meetings and meeting with people to screen them for a podcast, or having coffee with a friend, or studying for this upcoming exam, there are things that I now say no to more often than I probably ever said no to. And I've always been afraid of saying no
Mhm.
because, well, what if this person reaches out and then I say no to that, then they're never going to reach out again. Like, that's a ridiculous story I say in my head. But the fact is, if I can say, okay, you know what, this time doesn't work for me, I would really still like to get together. Let's plan for a different time. Wait a second, I can do that? Like, that's something that'll work, and it does. It manages to work, and saying no is really, a lot of the times when I do it the right way, is a little bit of taking care of myself.
Mhm.
And so this is going to lead into what I'm going to say about this next thing for the habits. Is I'm a fly by the seat kind of guy. Protecting my time, my freedom, was one of those things that allowed me to fly by my seat. And if I didn't come up with a plan, if I don't come up with some sort of plan, and I'm not talking something extensive, I'm talking something simple, something I can hold myself to, really simple plan, then I end up accomplishing the things that I set out to accomplish for those
Mhm.
habits. I get to keep that consistency. I get to uh, enjoy the fruits of the habit that I am working toward creating. And it starts out with a little bit of a plan because it's the thing I fall back on. If I don't have a plan, I'm screwed. I end up not committing because I don't have a little bit of a foundation to work off of.
To that point, to the idea of freedom and free time and all of that, I think I live a very systematized life. Like I have everything in between, all of my little routines. There's obviously the regular chaos of life, but my life is for the most part pretty systematic, and it has been for a really long time. I mean, I'm a homeschool mom with a farm, and like my life just required a lot of systems in order for everything to get done. And I feel like there's a lot of people who are like, oh, but I'm wild at heart, and I'm just, I'm a free spirit, and I want to be able to do these things. And to be really honest, the fact that my life is as systematized as it is lets me be the free spirit that I am, because I don't have all this chaos of when are these things going to get done? How am I going to accomplish this? What if this? What if that? None of that is an issue because I've got it all in systems, so that I have tons of free brain power and tons of energy and tons of free time that I can do what I want with. And I think that people see living by routine and structure and systems as very boring. And in reality, the fact that I live that way actually allows me to have more free time and be more spontaneous in a lot of ways. So I think it doesn't, it's not the picture most people imagine when I say that I live my life by routines and systems, but I'm definitely a fairly spontaneous person.
It comes across as being rigid when really it's not as rigid as it seems. It's just it helps you with accomplishing the freedom that you're looking for.
Yeah, exactly. And on that note, what are the ways that your habits have actually like tangibly benefited you guys in your life? Do you have any like stories or anything to share about bringing in a habit or bringing in a part of a routine that's actually benefited your life?
Well, I'll jump in with this one too. And thankfully, you gave me this question ahead of time, so I had some time to think about it. And I wanted to reflect back on the darkest period of my life, of my recovery. And I hit about almost 6 months sober, and I experienced to me a traumatic loss without telling the whole story. And it sent me spiraling into depression and darkness. Now, I stayed sober during that time, which was one of the few things that at my bottom I could go, "Well, at least I'm sober. At least I'm sober," giving myself some of that self-compassion. But because, and I gotta always tell this at halfway houses, because I had worked my program seriously for like the 5.5, 6 months before that, and very rigid because I went from treatment to a halfway house. I had a very pattern style behavior, and I think it was already helping rewire my brain so that when I experienced that loss, my instinct wasn't, let's go get a drink. My instinct was, I got to call my sponsor. I got to do this. And intellectually, I fell back on that too. I mean, I knew, or I believed at the time, because I've been working the program, that if I just kept doing what everyone else was doing, I would get through this hump. If I just took it one day at a time, I applied all the principles of the program one day at a time, first things first, you know, going back to those foundational things, but it helped me ride through the darkness. And I really did. I lived day by day. I was definitively looking for a way to put myself out of my misery, but I would say, I'm just going to make it through today. I'm just going to make it through today. Tomorrow, I'll reevaluate. And just like I did with drinking at first, I'm just not going to drink today. Tomorrow will be a new thing, and we'll cross that bridge then. And the hardest thing for me at that time, and what I've told this before, prolonged the depression, was that I was hesitant to ask for help. You know, and I had to go back. If I could do it differently, I would have asked for help sooner. I did it sideways. I had a great sponsor and a great therapist who was like, okay, here's what you're going to do next. You're going to reach out to people. You're going to ask for advice. But I never could come out and say, I'm thinking of ending it. And if there's any piece of advice, well, two pieces. One, if you decide to go completely alcohol free, you will likely have some rough times when the pink cloud has worn off and reality starts to sit in. And I want you to know that's normal. You know, it's normal. It's a part of the process. And you will get through it if you keep up those routines and patterns that have helped you get to that point. I'm really, really grateful for it.
Yeah. That resonates so deeply for me. And when I was thinking about all of these questions, my own responses to them, I went to the same exact place, Janice. My probably the darkest time of my life since I quit drinking 4 years ago was actually earlier this year in February, March. Again, traumatic loss, and just everything started feeling like it was falling apart and spiraling. It was like one loss after the other, for like 6 months. And I swear the only thing that kept my head above water was having consistent routines that I've had established for the years prior, so that I knew when you're in a really dark place, when you wake up in the morning, if you don't already have a set routine as far as what you're going to do, it's really hard to even drag yourself out of bed and know what you're supposed to do next. Like it just feels impossible. And so the fact that I knew how to get through the first 2 hours of the day because I did the same exact things that I've done for the last 4 years. And I've been in that place where I wake up and I sit up and I'm like, I don't know what to do. I can't do anything, and just lay back down. And like literally I could rot in my bed all day if I didn't have a routine that dragged me out of bed and at least made me face the morning. So those routines are, if I look at all of the ways that having routines and habits in my life have benefited me, it's been that they drag me through the hardest parts of life. When it feels like I can't drag myself through them, my routines are what keep me going. So I think really similar to what you said, Janice, that's probably one of the biggest benefits.
Go for it, Kristyna.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. I haven't had, fortunately for myself, I haven't had to experience yet a traumatic loss like that since getting sober. So, but I know that even the hard, like I say all the time, like even going through the hardest things now, just I'm able to handle so much better. And it's probably just because I'm present and I'm able to like really think about them rather than just brush them off. And I've learned different steps to handle things, rather than numb them out. So I think, everything I do now just really makes my life a lot easier. So
Mhm.
So I'm going to talk about something that Janice actually mentioned early in this episode. And it was where my head went when I first read this question. And Janice mentioned self-talk. And my self-talk was horrible. I was so freaking mean to myself. And I never realized that the message that I'm sending myself up here is a message that I'm going to like live out. It is something that it's going to spill out into the world, and I'm going to make those messages real one way or another. And I got really pissed off at myself one day. I was at work and I was speaking with a maintenance manager, and like a lot of the other times, I was quiet. I let myself get walked all over. I walked away at the end of the conversation. Then I came up with shit, I should have said this when I was in that moment. How many times have you done that, right? You walked away and you finally had the words that you were silent about. And I would get really pissed off at myself, and I would call myself a lot of nasty things. Why can't you're so stupid? You can't come up with this stuff in the moment like everyone else can, because it seemed like everyone else could. Why do you got to be so slow? Why you're such a pussy? You can't even stand up for yourself. Like those messages were real. And I sat in my office and I was all mad at myself. And I turned around and I said, you know what? For every negative thing I say about myself, I'm going to say something positive. And so I said something negative, and then just all in my mind, okay, you're going to have to think about what's the opposite of that, the reality opposite of that. And over and over and over again, I started to reframe the way I thought about situations. And I talk about that now because Julie will tell me that I'm overly optimistic about shit on a regular basis. And I think a lot of that comes from the fact that my negative self-talk is very rarely something that takes hold anymore, because I've valued how I speak to myself so much that I wanted to change it. And my mental health today is a million times better than it was before, not only because I quit drinking, but because I've worked on not using myself as a toilet. And it's the easiest thing to do because nobody can argue with you but yourself. It's also a pretty easy thing to do when you realize that the power of your own words change the way you see the world. And as soon as I started actually seeing the benefits of that, my life has changed still today. I have more confidence today than I have ever had. And I think that is very close to the root of how I exist in the world today.
At its core, that's just taking a bad habit, the negative self-talk, and putting
Mhm.
a good habit on top of it. And
Yeah.
so every time you do the bad habit, it triggers the good habit until that
Yeah.
the positive habit becomes the new thing. And that's just practice, right? We
It
have to
was.
practice the same thing.
It took a lot of practice. I
Mhm.
didn't believe that this silly idea was going to change anything, but I was really, really tired of just talking bad about myself all the time.
Mhm.
The constant dragging around of negativity was clearly not benefiting me at all. Like I wasn't protecting myself from anything. I was just making myself angry. I was making myself sad. I was taking a situation that didn't work out well and then beating myself over it like with a baseball bat to make sure I knew the pain that was there, that existed, was real. Like I didn't need all of that to create the comfort. I needed to actually talk to myself in a way that I wished others would talk to me, but I had to do it for me first.
Mhm. That self-compassion piece for sure.
Yeah.
I will say too, on the subject of the ways that habits and routines and consistency has been a benefit for me, again, with living on a farm and up until recently homeschooling, that's chaos. My life is chaos. That's the best word to define the way that I've lived for the last 20 years. Having a consistent morning routine and a consistent evening routine were like the anchors of my day. So, as long as I did the things I knew were healthy in the morning, and I knew that the evening routine of settling down and like my peaceful, cozy hour was coming, it made it so much easier to deal with whatever chaos happened during the day, whatever went wrong, whatever was stressful, whatever made me angry, or any of the stuff that came up. Those two routines on like as the bookends or the anchors of my day helped me stay fairly regulated. I always knew I was going to have a comfortable, consistent place to land. So I think that, even though we know routines are good for us, sometimes we're like, how much does this really matter? Do I really need to put in the effort? And I think that you're not going to maybe see that benefit every single day. You're not necessarily going to feel it, but there are going to be days where you're like, thank goodness that I already had these habits in place because that's what saved me. And I think it's important that we all, keep that in mind on the days that we don't feel like it. You're really, at some point, you're going to be glad that you did. So let's wrap this up with our closing question. I know we've got listeners out there right now. This is early January. They're digging into resolutions and making new habits and forming new routines. If there's someone listening that keeps wobbling back and forth with trying to start a new habit, what is one piece of advice that you would give them?
I actually wanted to share a quote I found, and this is actually what I would tell somebody. It says, "The things that you are most resistant to doing are usually the things you need to do the most. Resistance is a compass that points directly to growth." So, yeah, so I feel like it's exactly what we're talking about. These things that you don't really want to do, but you know that they're going to make you feel better, do better. Um, but you don't really want to do them, you should do them because they are going to help you move along. And another one I wrote down actually too is that we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act, but a habit. So that's my
I
two
think
cents.
those are great. I think for me too, it's important to recognize or to tell myself that, yeah, it's natural for this to be uncomfortable at first. If I keep pushing through, I'll get there. But, and not but, the other thing I think that's so important is to break it down into small bite-sized pieces, manageable pieces so you can see success along the way. I don't know. I'm very much into, again, a trait of my childhood, accomplishments. And I love the point that you said about check as a dopamine hit. That really hits home because that is what it is for me. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe if you're wobbling, if try writing it down, making a list, and breaking the skill down into cleaning the kitchen into 6 pieces.
Mm-hmm.
It's worth trying.
Everything is worth trying. And maybe
Mhm.
that's one of the things that I would say to someone who's struggling is everything is worth trying. Give it a shot. If it doesn't work, try something else, try a different tactic until you figure out what works for you. The other thing that I would say is when it comes down to habits, especially for me, I'm not a natural exerciser. It's not something I like doing. It's not something like that I just jumped into and I'm like, all right, this is great. I had to really work to make that a habit. And so I always focused on, I have this persona in my head that I've had since I first quit drinking of me in 30 days. What would me in 30 days like for me to do right now? And I will check in with that. And as soon as I think about that, if I'm thinking exercise, 30 days from now, me is going to be so glad that I actually got on the treadmill and did the thing today, or that I actually stopped and lifted weights for a bit. So think about future you. What would future you have you do right now? And let that be a bit of a motivator to actually go do the thing.
Yeah. Play the
Yeah.
tape forward, right?
Yeah,
Mhm.
Yeah.
exactly.
Hmm.
Exactly.
What can you do today to benefit tomorrow's you?
Hmm. That's
That's
a much more succinct way of saying what I just said. Thank you.
I'm going to
Both were
finish this
good.
off with a couple of things that came to my mind right off the bat. Is if you started a new habit or something that you've always wanted to do and you're back on trying to do it again or whatever it is, remember your why. You
Mm.
chose it for a reason. There was something in you that said, I want to try this again or try this new thing. You have a why back in there that you probably haven't quite discovered yet, but it's clearly important enough to you to give it a shot. So remember your why, write it down, put it somewhere where you can see it. Get a whiteboard. I'm a huge fan of whiteboards. I have whiteboards so I can see my stuff, so it's visual. They're cheap. You can buy a whiteboard at Walmart for like $12 and hang it on your wall and write those things down. Your whys. Super easy way to remember why you're doing the thing that you're doing for you. And the last thing I'm going to add before I wrap this up is the smallest steps. Janice, you talked about this multiple times. It's the smallest steps, but they lead to the biggest leaps. It's never chasing the big thing. It's always, in my so far experience, and this is 5 years almost of putting one foot in front of the other, is the smallest steps have always led to the biggest leaps. So thank you, Janice, and thank you, Kristyna. Welcome to No Alcohol Needed. Let's be happy.
And thank you guys so much for being here. And for our listeners, make sure you guys check out the show notes. There's a link to our guest bios, so you can get to know Janice and Kristyna and chase down all of the cool things that they're doing in the recovery community and get to know them better. So make sure you check that out. Thank you so much for being here. And also make sure you hit subscribe or follow so you don't miss any future episodes of the No Alcohol Needed podcast.